post US Open, I always feel like I want to exhale. And for a lot of these players, they don't get that opportunity, right? And we're already kind of full into this Asian indoor hard court swing. I want to start with really the stars on the ATP side, and look, Carlos Alcaraz obviously completing that US Open title was formidable. This season in itself has been formidable, incredible, and he's carrying on right now successfully. Off to a great start in Japan, and looking sharp as ever. What do you make of sort of the 2025 dominance of Carlos Alcaraz, maybe contrasting to prior years? I get the sense he's feeling the most comfortable I've ever seen him look, to be honest.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge level of just mental security, isn't there? There's very little doubt. And to play tennis the way Carlos Alcaraz plays, you have to just have no self-doubt. You couldn't hit the shots that he hits and play the way that he plays unless you're just completely confident in yourself. So that's certainly one thing. I was there. I still remember really vividly that French Open semi-final against Novak Djokovic when he got just paralyzing cramp. And that was mostly mental. It really wasn't physical. It was almost exclusively mental. And to think that was only a couple of years ago, and now he's this just indomitable force. I saw that he's the ATP Tour win leader this year with 66, and that's 17 clear of the next guy. I mean, that may have gone out of date by the time people listen to this by one, but he's a long way ahead of the rest of the tour. Jannik Sinner obviously missed a couple of months, so he's short of those numbers. For me, the biggest thing on the court, though, is the serve. I mean, watching him at Wimbledon, regularly hitting 136, 137, and hitting spots with it, you sort of look at it and go, I mean, it makes the sort of result at Wimbledon even more remarkable in some ways. But, outside of Sinner, you do look at it and think, who on earth is supposed to beat this guy? Because when he's serving massive, when he's got great variety from the baseline, he's got a pretty rock solid backhand. Like you do sort of go, well, I just have to wait for him to have an off day, and one thing that he's had very few of in 2025 is off days. We were kind of waiting for it to happen at the US Open. When's the concentration lapse going to
Mm.
come? And it came a little bit in the final. There was a little kind of flicker, but it wasn't the kind of Carlos Alcaraz, dropped 2 sets out of nowhere that we want to happen 12 months ago. It really does make you think, well, Jannik Sinner aside, who's also a freak, like who's supposed to compete with this guy, because he's starting to become the full package.
Yeah, and we said it. We had Mike Cation on for our US Open recap, and I sort of alluded to, Sinner, Alcaraz, this pair. It's not just a gap between these two and the rest. It's a chasm. And watching Alcaraz and recently he just defeated Casper Ruud in 3 sets, but against Brandon Nakashima here in Japan, I mean, 39 winners. 39 winners in a 2-set match. It's a staggering total, particularly that he wasn't piling up aces. This was just off the ground, so ferocious and clean. I look back to a few kind of dominant seasons in the past from the big three. Roger Federer had 92 wins in 2006. We think with Novak, 2011, 2015, Rafa, 2010. Look, Carlos he doesn't have 3 slams this season, but is it realistic he maybe cracks 80 wins this season, just how he's rolling right now? And then you look at Shanghai ATP finals. Is that a realistic number?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, you've done the maths better than I can quickly, but yeah, he's certainly in that kind of. It's a season in that echelon. I saw that this is his 9th consecutive final, making the final in Tokyo, and I saw a stat that threw that up there with the sort of other consecutive runs. And now the GOAT here is Novak, 17 finals in a row. You mentioned 2015, that was the season.
Mhm.
And when people talk about GOATs and greatest players of all time in any sport, I always sort of caveat that, and I say I don't want to talk about the greatest. I want to talk about the most dominant
Mm.
player of all time, because
Yeah.
really all you can't judge. I'm a cricket fan. You can't judge Donald Bradman of the 50s against Virat Kohli. You can't trans-era very easily. But in terms of levels of dominance, I think this season that Alcaraz has put up, and you sort of have to, as you mentioned, Sinner's just in a different bracket. Like Alcaraz has his tennis against the rest of the tour and tennis against Sinner. It does feel that level of dominance that, Novak had in 2015. Rogers' year was at 08 there. They're the kind of And there's some similarities between Roger and Rafa, right? Where Roger and Rafa in 2008, to a to a larger or lesser extent, were pretty much playing each other and then playing everyone else. And it was like, well, as long as the draw works out fine and Rafa hasn't been injured, we get the Rafa Roger final, and the rest is just a sort of circus leading up to it.
Yep.
And that I think that's how the tour has felt for a couple of months now. When Sinner came back, and he said it, I talk about this a lot, and I'm taking you off topic here, but in Rome, when Sinner played Alcaraz, it was his first tournament back from the ban, and he lost. And he said afterwards, "I'm so glad I played Carlos, so I knew what I had to do to be back at the level." But and the sort of the subtext there is because playing all these other people is largely irrelevant. I could
Yeah.
beat them with one hand tied behind my back. It doesn't matter. I don't
Mhm.
know what level I'm playing when I beat, the world number 7.
Yeah.
And I do think that's where Alcaraz is. He's hugely dominant over the rest of the tour, and he's 50-50 with Sinner.
Yeah. No, that's really, really well articulated. It made me think, Rafael Nadal had a column, The Athletic had a column with Rafa just at the US Open and talking about the big 3 era and what it was like to compete. And Rafa illustrated that you could never at any time relax because all 3 of them were in this constant competition with one another of what do I have to do better? What can I do to problem solve against Novak or Roger? And vice versa for the other guys. And that is kind of the feeling. Obviously, this is what Jannik Sinner alluded to in regards to his finals performance at Flushing Meadows. I feel like these two, they're not thinking of anybody else on the tour. Yannick knows he has to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do I get Carlitos next time. And his conclusion was, I'm being too predictable. So I see this kind of end of season 2025 for Yannick being the opportunity where I can reinvent myself a little bit because I don't have Australia coming up immediately. I can work on some things. Should we how drastic of a change could we really anticipate from, I would say, probably the best ball striker on tour?
Oh, I mean, yeah, by a distance, the best ball striker. I mean, look, it's gonna take someone like you or Calvin or whoever, someone with a great eye to see these changes because, he's not gonna come out and play left-handed. Like, he's not gonna, like, reinvent the wheel here because this is the very top level of tennis. It'll be kind of, 0.4% changes here and there. It'll
Mhm.
be, going inside out more in certain situations or, going bigger on second serve on certain points. And what he does lack, and the kind of, most people can see that the biggest difference between them is the variety and the kind of, Alcaraz seems to have all the shots. If you think about the Alcaraz forehand alone, I can off the top of my head kind of visualize Alcaraz hitting 7 or 8 different forehands pretty easily, and that's not just the drop shots, it's the inside out, the incredible inside in,
Mhm.
the cross court one, the one he rolls up the line, sort of Nadal style. Sinner doesn't really have that. I think in your mind's eye, if you try and imagine Sinner hitting a forehand, it's cross or line, right? Like it's
Pretty
pretty much it.
straight line, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's not hitting moon balls. He
Mm.
doesn't have that same kind of variety. So I don't think it'll be the kind of seismic game shift that, for example, Roger Federer post injury in 2017
Yeah.
when he came back and played incredibly aggressively. Um, Not least because that's really hard. Andy Murray found that in the end of his career, and he was trying to be more aggressive, to try and keep points short, but he just couldn't do it. There's a bit of your brain that you've trained for 20 years, and you'll know this with working with players, Ben. There's a bit of your brain you've trained to do certain things, and
Mhm.
you have to tell it to make a really big change in order to make a really tiny one. Oh, pretend you're trying to slap a table tennis ball across the room. That's the thought you want when you're trying to hit that forehand, and it'll look precisely the same, but you can sort of create that little change, and I think that's maybe the thing that people are forgetting a little bit about what Jannik Sinner's going to go through over the next couple of months. Like he can't reinvent his game. I think the advantage he has is, and it is completely by quirk of fate, Darren Cahill's retiring
Yep.
because, much as that'd be a huge loss, it means he will have to, assuming he wants to continue working with another coach, which you would assume he is, get another voice in there alongside Simone Magnozzi. And, sometimes it doesn't matter how good that other voice is, just a different voice in a
Absolutely.
room can make a huge difference and allow you to kind of affect a big change if you're trying to make one, which is it's the hardest thing to do in sport, right?
It is. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good segue really into another player I wanted to talk about because I look into this final block of the calendar and look at different players where they're looking to make changes, looking to get right. Obviously, it's been I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's been an abysmal 2025 for Daniil Medvedev by all standards of what he's used to and what he expects. It's been really painful to watch, especially the Grand Slam performances. And after a number of years, parted ways with his longtime coach Gilles Servara. So he has Thomas Johansson in that corner. He knows he has to make a change. I mean, we saw so much drama at Flushing Meadows in that match with Benjamin Bonzi. But look, Danil's playing some better tennis this week. He just beat Sasha Zverev. I I wonder, he's still late 20s. Can Danil fix himself? And can he be one of these guys? I don't know that I'm not suggesting he's ready to challenge these two, but can he at least get back in that conversation of, top 10, top five?
Can he unlock himself from the cage of memedom? Because that's kind of where he is at the moment, right? Like
Well
he's
said. Yeah.
he's just a sort of meme player,
Hmm.
and a complete. He's a first week guy. Like he's a sort of. I mean, this year he's a first round guy, as we know. He's
Yeah.
lost all 4 Grand Slams in the first round. Um, I mean, I actually had to check there because I wasn't sure where he was ranked in the world. I can't believe he's still top 20. Like I don't understand how he's 18 in the world. I mean, he's picking up points somewhere, but in secret or I don't know, just pinching them off other players somewhere. Um, it's a huge challenge for him. I love him. I think he's great for the game. I think he's an amazing talker. He's hilarious. People really engage with him. He's a bit mad to watch. And I think from a tennis perspective, from what I haven't watched loads, but from what I've seen, it is getting better already. He looks like he's up on the baseline a bit more, which I think is a huge uh, a thing that really changes his whole game.
Hmm.
The thing we always associate the Medvedev quote unquote glory years with is like standing in row 3 and returning serve
Yes.
and not really getting up to the baseline at all during rallies, making a little bit of progress, but just making balls and waiting for people to miss and then just holding serve because he's huge. And, eventually people worked it out a bit, and he didn't work out that it was worked out for a while. And I think maybe a classic example where Gilles Savara said, and I think Gilles Savara is a great coach. Everyone I've spoken to who knows him says he's a brilliant worker. And I think they both probably realized that it doesn't matter what I say at this point. It's just not gonna make the difference. And I don't know much about Thomas Johansson other than obviously his playing career, but
Yes. Yeah.
it may well be just that having that different voice in there has got something in Daniil's brain to rewire a bit and made him brave enough to go and stand on the baseline. I do also wonder whether losing first round of 4 Grand Slams is the kind of rock bottom that he needed. Like,
Mhm.
because as a player, you're always kind of trained to trust the process and actually to reject the evidence of your eyes and say, no, I know I'm losing, but I know I'm doing the right thing and it'll balance out. And then at what point do you go, okay, well, actually, no, I'm losing and do need to change something? I
Yes.
think probably, yeah, having 0 points to defend at Grand Slams next year might have just been the point where Medvedev went, yeah, all right, I'm not scared to get up on the baseline because the reality is I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Can't do anything worse. And it's really exciting. I mean, him beating Zverev as comfortably as he did is really intriguing. It's not a match that I mean, it literally finished about 2 hours ago, and I didn't see it, but I'm quite intrigued to go and look at the kinda numbers behind that because, they've known each other a long time. They've played each other a lot of times, and then, their mothers, I think, played each other back in the '90s or the '80s. So, it's quite interesting that Medvedev's just gone out and sort of smacked him there. The
Yeah.
scoreline looks very one-sided, and that would
Yep.
suggest there is progress being made.
Yeah, no, 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 definitely, and, no love lost between those 2 either. Remember that? I don't think they like each other at all, which
No.
makes it interesting, and they've played more than 20 times. I wanna shift over to obviously the top British player, and we have such a short-term memory in this sport, as you know. I mean, I feel like nobody's really obviously talking about Jack Draper right now, and so unfortunate with the timing of the injury, and you go back, months prior, he was playing such incredible tennis at Indian Wells and having a fantastic clay court season, finaling a Masters 1000 in Madrid, and suddenly this arm injury creeps in and seems to have at least derailed 2025 for as far as I can tell. I don't know if we're going to see him back on the court this year. It seems unlikely. Where are you at with Draper right now? Is he the type of talent that the moment he gets back on court, we're going to see sort of that top 10 level quite quickly again, or does he have to kind of rebuild from the ground up?
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, as I understand it, yeah, that's him done for the season. He's signed up for the UTS Grand Final as a wild card in December in London, so that looks like that'll be his kind of return, quote
Right.
unquote. He's won that before and won an awful lot of money, so I think that's why he signed up for that one. And I also know that his team are very keen on the format because as part of the preseason, it's a very cardio intense kind of tournament. So
Hmm.
they like amount of running involved. Um, as for will he be able to hit the ground running again? I do feel like he's been through injury so much. He's been on and off the court a lot in his life, and I think he's pretty good at picking a racket up and just going. Um, I am pretty disappointed to have seen him play the US Open. I don't think he should have played that tournament.
Yeah.
And I think there were other factors involved there. He launched his new Vuori deal, his new fashion deal there, and it's very hard to believe anything other than that had an impact on the decision to go and play the US Open. He wasn't fully fit. That they've been pretty open about that in the days and weeks since. And maybe the reality was it was either play the US Open and then rest of the year, or just rest of the year anyway. And they sort of felt that there was no loss by going. But and the type of injury, it is a bone bruise, and I'm not a doctor, but it can get worse. But I think you get pretty strong warning signs about if it's going to get really bad. You find out about it pretty quickly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 10 player. Like, I just think he is. And look, being fit is part of tennis. You can't say, oh, he's unlucky with injuries. Yeah, some people are, but the reality is that's part of the game. Being fit
Mhm.
is part of it. And, as we mentioned at the top, the game flogs the arse out of you like
Oh
very
yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And that's something that he's kind of struggled with. But I think that his top level tennis is great. He's a left-hander. There are not many lefties in the game at the moment, and I say it on Tennis Unfiltered all the time. Being left-handed is basically cheating because you have so much of an advantage on so many big points. Especially serving into the ad court. It's just
Oh
ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah.
And he's got a really unusual game. He hits two very different balls. With his
Mhm.
forehand is so big and spinny, and his backhand is so flat and
Very
solid.
fast.
The
Yeah.
ATP numbers tend to show him as having the fourth or fifth best backhand on tour when he's played a good number of tournaments. So, yeah, I absolutely think he can be a top 10 player. I mean, he's still ninth in the race. Like he's not going to play World Tour finals,
Yeah.
but if someone above him got injured, and lots of ifs and buts, but he's
Yeah.
got a good number of points this year, despite having various injuries and the hard court struggles. And that's his US hard court is his best surface. So
Mhm.
he's absolutely that level of player for me. I just think this is it now. I just think like Jack Draper being injured on and off is just what we're gonna be like, have to get used to,
Yeah.
and it's not gonna go away, and we're just always gonna be like, "Oh, Jack will be great if he's fit," and it's just always gonna be the if. I don't know that he's ever gonna be someone who plays 90 matches a year, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, the other left-hander, Ben Shelton, also dealing with injury, and I want to just briefly shift it to Canadians because it feels like this is really opening a door for Felix Auger-Aliassime, Aliassime, who's not on court right now and did just get married, gets a nice, well-deserved break after this semifinals run from the U.S. Open. You look at his history, how well he's played through the indoor hard court stretch of the season. He was fabulous in 2022 when he won 3 consecutive titles. I mean, even if this US Open, and I want your take, was this the aberration kind of fluke run, or is this the real Felix?
Yeah, is it the outlier? Is it the trend? That's the sort of constant question, isn't it? I mean, I hope it's the latter, and that this is the kind of second coming of Felix Auger-Aliassime. If you consider that 4 years ago he made a semi-final at the US and then didn't quite kick on in the way that people thought or hoped that he might. Is it a coincidence that him and Denis Shapovalov have got married at the same time, by the way? Like within about 3 weeks of each other?
I know. I don't know that they planned this, but it's kind of funny, especially given they were childhood friends. But yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. It's slightly bizarre. It does happen like that. I can confirm, having got married within a week of one of my best mates.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, I hope it's the trend for Felix, because he's just obviously a fun tennis player to watch. He seems to be doubling down on that style. Really just like I remember him saying, I think after the quarterfinal of the US, I've just got to go for my shots. Like that's the only way I can play,
Yeah,
and it's very hard to keep that mindset going and never be kind of racked with the self doubt. When you're trying to compete, especially when you're trying to compete with Sinner and Alcaraz, who just, you can throw your best at them and it just sort of comes back with interest. It, what I can't really identify, because I haven't got the kind of eye for it, is what's changed. I don't know, whether he is playing more aggressively or whether he is maybe missing a bit less. I think that's a difficult thing for me to know. I think for him to break through in a big way, and look, I think he's 10th in the race now, and will probably be at ATP World Tour Finals, which would be a huge thing, especially given that he's basically an indoor specialist. Like,
hmm,
and ATP World Tour courts are so quick. Like,
yeah,
Turin, it'll be the quickest court on any surface the whole year by far, and that'll suit him massively. Like, it's not against the realms of possibility that he wins it, because we often do get weird winners. And
yeah.
and with what would that represent? Would that be a big moment? Maybe, but I think for me to believe in Felix, the second coming, I've got to see it on a clay court or on a slow hard court or on a
Yeah.
on a surface that he wouldn't ordinarily excel on, because
Mhm.
so far it's just been him doing great things on great surfaces for him, you
Yes.
know, which we've seen before. Yeah, I feel like I've seen this film before, and I'm kind of waiting for the sort of bridge in the song. I don't know.
Yeah.
You will have a much better inside track on it.
No, no, I think you're completely correct. I mean, as amazing as this run was at the U.S. Open, it's one thing when it's happening in those perfectly favorable, suitable conditions that align to your game and your tools and what works for you. Can we see it? I feel like Felix, with his tools, should be an all-court player, and he's had some success on clay in the past. He's had success at Wimbledon in the past, so I got to see it a little more year round across different portions of the calendar. Like, I don't want a dud at the front end of 2026 where, he goes out to Altmaier in the second round of Australia or something like that, if that makes sense. So, but we'll see how he closes the year, where obviously, as you said, that the conditions are gonna be perfect for him
Mm.
indoors, as it often is for Canadian players. Before we shift to the women's, one player you might have your eye on for the fall indoor hardcourt season who could make some noise, or it would be of importance to them.
Yeah, it's so tough, because we often have this conversation this time of year, and I'm just like, anyone who's still got 2 legs and 2 arms, basically,
Yeah.
because everyone is just clinging on,
Mhm.
desperate to be in the Maldives, within weeks,
Yeah.
and fitness is such a big thing, and so when you mentioned it before, I sort of had a lurk, and I thought, who's got fuel still in the tank? And the perennial answer to that question is Alex de Minaur, because he's always got fuel in the tank, 'cause he's got the biggest tank in
Yeah.
world tennis. And I do think, conditions, and everything that goes with that at this time of year probably do suit him, and he's very well placed in the world rankings to make a pretty big push. They're quite bunched, basically outside of Sinner and Alcaraz.
Yes.
And I think that means that, he could jump to world number 4 by the end of the year. That's not beyond the realms of possibility. And jumping from 8 to 5 into the top 4 is so big for your Grand Slam draws.
Oh, for
It
sure.
gives you such preferential treatment on draw day and through those first 4 or 5 rounds. So I think in terms of someone who can do it and someone to whom it will mean a lot in terms of their overall progress, Alex de Minaur is kind of my pick. There's a good chance he gets beaten 1-0 in Beijing by Jannik Sinner before this podcast even sees the light of
Oh,
day,
yeah.
in which case I
Sure.
look like an idiot. But yeah, I think he's the one. I mean, Felix certainly was on my radar. I knew we would talk about him anyway. But
Yeah.
I think he's the one really that you look at it and go, this feels like just a real opportune moment, that chink in the armor that he can kind of just surge through and kind of blossom in the top of the game, I think.
Thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.